Okay, welcome back into the Behind the Curtain podcast with Jeff Reynolds. I'm your host, Jeff Reynolds, and I am here in Portland International Airport in the bowels somewhere, waiting for a flight for my next guest, and she has graciously agreed to be interviewed, Lorraine Woodwark of the Immigration Reform Law Institute and Attorneys United for a Safer America. Lorraine, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Well, thank you, Jeff. It's actually Attorneys United for a Secure America.
I was so close. Dang it. Attorneys United for a Secure America.
Yes.
There you go. So Lorraine was here this weekend and doing a couple of different things. One was giving a keynote address at the quarterly meeting of Oregonians for Immigration Reform. Also, working with local lawyers in the area. So, again, thanks for being on the podcast. And tell me, first of all, talk about what you're doing with early and what you're doing with lawyers across the nation.
Okay. Well, with the Immigration Reform Law Institute, we believe in having secure borders and protecting United States sovereignty. We also would like enforcement of immigration laws so that everyone can come to the United States the same way, as opposed to some people being able to jump in line and get ahead of people who come here the legal way. And so we're against illegal immigration on that respect. But then we also want to be able to protect America's sovereignty and basically have people who do immigrate here be productive members of society and be more of a benefit than a burden on our country.
Right, because the old saying goes, you can have open borders and a welfare state, but you can't have both, right?
Right, and if you have open borders, you'll soon cease to have a country.
Right. And so let's talk about that. So many people on the left accuse us of being racist and against immigration and all of those buzzwords. Right. What are the problems with that line of thinking, and what are the problems with illegal immigration?
Well, that line of thinking is dishonest because the United States admits over 1 million legal immigrants every year, and that's more than the rest of the world combined. I mean, so the two questions I have is, why do people come here illegally if they can come here legally? Mm-hmm. And second, well, of course, it's for the benefits and what they can get free from Americans that they haven't paid into. Then the second question is, what's the rest of the world doing? There's other countries where immigrants can migrate to, they can go to, become citizens of, and why aren't other countries in the world accepting as many immigrants as they're trying to force the United States to do?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. It almost, I mean, it sounds like a conspiracy theory almost, but if you really boil it down, why are we pressured to accept so many? It's almost as if it's a deliberate undermining of the nation.
Well, it does. And one of the things I've come to understand is that, well, the United States Constitution was written for the benefit of Americans. So American citizens have the right to address their government. In fact, the government works for American citizens, and the government is accountable to American citizens. They just have to hold the government accountable. When the founders established the United States, they wanted it to be a limited and a constrained government that, was going to be overseen by the public.
Right. And ironically, maybe, but you're an immigrant yourself, right? You came here legally from Canada.
Right. When I was 16, it took many years and a lot of waiting, and I had a very interesting experience. But actually, quickly back on the Constitution. The United States has the only Constitution in the world where it's for the benefit of the citizens to protect them against a tyrannical government, whereas the rest of the world, including Canada, has a Constitution that only gives rights to citizens that they can easily take away at any moment.
Right.
So they don't have a contract where the citizens are necessarily protected.
No, that's a very important point, and that's my political involvement comes from a deeper understanding. As every day I learn more and more about the constitutional restraints on government, and that's what it's all about. It's not restraints on the citizens. It recognizes the inherent inalienable rights that are born into every individual human being.
Those are God-given rights.
Yes.
And the only way Americans should be able to lose those rights is if they allow the government to take those rights. And that should never happen. And Americans should understand what their Constitution stands for. And I do see a lot of people who don't understand the full complexity. Well, it's actually not that complex, but what the United States Constitution stands for. And this is why millions of people want to come to the United States, because it's the only free country in this world.
Right. It's the shining city on the hill, right? As Reagan said. And so let's talk more about some of the issues that we see with illegal immigration. You had some shocking slides yesterday in your presentation, and let's talk about some of that stuff. We see a lot of criminality, but we also see a lot of, and here's another thing we always get accused of is saying that Latinos are responsible for most of the crime, and that's not the case. It's not about the color of the skin. It's the element that comes in illegally and flaunts our laws. So let's talk MS-13 and rape trees and drug cartels and all that stuff. I mean, that stuff goes on every day at the border.
Right, exactly. Well, immigration affects every aspect of our life, not only through crime and education and our health and our taxes and even our elections. But if we're to focus on crime, with open borders, we're seeing a lot of narco-terrorism. We're also seeing the gang members. And I mean, these are not contributing members to society. And I think the United States doesn't need any more criminals. We have enough, problems with that. But once somebody enters this country illegally or overstays their visa, they become an illegal alien. And then that is their first crime. After that, there's many more crimes. And a lot of people who don't come here the proper way often don't have the best of intentions for the United States. And one of the facts I gave yesterday is around 60% of people that do get caught, we don't know, the people that don't get caught, but they're coming here to take and get the freebies and get the free handouts.
The welfare state.
Right. Then we have another element, are the terrorists from terror nations. We also have people who are related to the human smuggling and the drug smuggling. And that's not American values. That's not what Americans stand for.
Right. And importing crime seems like on its face, a self-destructive thing to do.
It is. And it will undermine the sovereignty. And slavery is against the law. And yet we have a big slavery problem in this country. And ironically, January is National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. And so that's where I'm trying to put a big focus on, because we are having, as you said, the rape trees. And what that is these poor little children are rented or sold by their parents in South America to some weird people and they come on this long track into the United States, pretend to be family unit. And the moment they enter the United States, these children are raped. Their clothes are taken off and they're raped and violated. And these are like 5, 6, 8, 9, 10-year-old boys and girls who are being harmed. And that also isn't. And
then the disgusting act is followed by another disgusting act of throwing their underwear into a tree as sort of a trophy.
A trophy, it is. It is. And a lot of these, horrible, perverted people are going to come in and hurt the actual immigrant communities and Americans' children and grandchildren. So this is something that needs to be stopped, and another good reason for a border wall and stronger enforcement.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's part of the problem. Obviously, we need a barrier, but we also have laws that activists have sued over and over so that we cannot enforce the laws, and that's a real problem. I know, I hear this stuff all the time. I live in Portland, so I hear all of the accusations. Talk about some of why is it so important to enforce the laws that we actually have right now?
It's part of human nature. Everyone wants to be able to play by the same set of rules. And by allowing people to come in here illegally and benefit and do better than American citizens or even legal immigrants who played by the rules, that is just fundamentally unfair to everyone. And you're actually rewarding bad behavior. And when you reward bad behavior, you get more of it. So we need to stop that.
The other side will often say that, well, that's, you're blowing that out of proportion, or that only happens occasionally. And most people that come over the border are good people that don't commit crimes, and are productive members of society or good members of the community. And you're breaking up families and that kind of stuff. How would you respond to those kinds of statements?
Well, let's unravel that question.
Because I hear this a lot.
Oh, yeah, you do. I mean, they say breaking up families. Well, first of all, they did the breaking up of the families by coming into this country illegally. And if you look at it, Americans get separated from their children, their families every day by going to prison, or there's divorce. There's all sorts of or parents die. I mean, so that excuse is just bogus. It's an outright lie. And
because they're committing a crime by crossing the border in the first place. So.
Right. Or even an American
and they're consciously making that choice.
Right. They've consciously made that choice to break up their families. And even we talk about the parents who've rented or sold their kids. Well, they've already separated their kids. I mean, any parent in the United States who did that, they'd have their children taken away and put in foster care. So, I mean, so it's completely bogus arguments that really has no validity or merit to them. So, and then the next one you have is like, well, they're just here to work and everything. Well, what about all the legal immigrants who come here? And what about American families who work? And by the competition of illegal aliens, not only are they depressing American workers' wages, they're also taking jobs away from Americans who are more than willing to take those same jobs. In fact, Koch Food Industries or distributors last year, they had an ICE raid where 234 illegal aliens were picked up and taken away by ICE. And the next day, Koch Food Distributors had a job fair, and thousands of Americans showed up for those very same jobs.
Wow.
Yes, and they ended up hiring a number of American citizens who were legally authorized to work there.
Wow. So it's kind of a myth that it's the jobs that Americans won't do.
You know, I mean, some of the jobs Americans won't do are like committing crimes, but we don't need any more. We have plenty. We have our prisons who are very full of people, and we don't need any more foreigner criminals to come here. Right.
So on the other side, you see people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar and the Squad and all those far left individuals who are calling for, and many of the Democratic presidential candidates even are calling for the abolition of ICE. How would you respond to that?
Well, that's our law enforcement. They do a lot of really great work protecting American citizens, and they also protect legal immigrants. So Americans and legal immigrants are protected by ICE. And up in Washington State, they're now trying to prevent ICE from going into the courthouses to detain illegal aliens. And I think that's fundamentally unfair. As a lawyer in California, I had clients who went to court with me. They were Americans, and they were detained. So why is it okay for Americans to be detained in courthouses and yet not illegal aliens?
Yeah, and we made that illegal quite a while ago here in Oregon. And there have been judges who snuck illegal aliens out the back door of their own courtroom to avoid, because they heard a rumor that an ICE agent was outside waiting to detain them.
Right.
Why is there such... I don't know if you can answer this question, but it just seems like there's such an anti-law enforcement attitude, especially on the left. Where does that stem from? How do they not want to follow the rule of law?
Well, it'd be scary to get inside their minds, so I'm not going to do that. But I think a lot of it is to try and break American sovereignty. I see that they can keep the public ignorant, and I think as long as the public doesn't realize that illegal aliens are actually being treated better than American citizens and legal immigrants, that people might actually realize there's something really fundamentally wrong on how illegal aliens tend to spend less time in prison for the same exact crime that an American citizen has committed. And yet, they're paroled sooner. They're given all sorts of protections, while as American citizens who've committed crimes and been convicted for them spend a longer time before they're able to be released from prison. Now, that is fundamentally unfair, and that's not how that's a violation of equal protection. In fact, I've heard, these other groups that support open borders saying, oh, well, illegal aliens should be protected by the Constitution too. Well, no, that's not true. As a real immigrant myself, who is now a citizen, I was told the Constitution didn't apply to me. It was only people subject to the jurisdiction therein. And only as an immigrant, I had certain qualifications and requirements I had to follow. Now, a legal alien should have even less rights than an American citizen or a legal immigrant. And we go back to got to play by the same set of rules, and that's what's fair for all people.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because as I recall it, you came to the United States in what, 1986?
1980, you're trying to age me, aren't you? Oh, you devil. Oh.
No. That's
in the early 1980s. I came here
when you were 2.5.
Right. Yeah, I was still in the womb. No. I mean, I was a teenager, graduated from high school, and I wanted to come to the United States sooner than waiting for the list. So I applied to go to college. I was admitted, and I had to follow all the requirements. I'd gone through the documentation. I had to show I was able to provide for myself and not become a public dependent. I was also had to show that I didn't have any contagious diseases or a criminal background. And this was even though they already had my application to become an immigrant and a citizen later on. I had to follow through the same procedures to become a foreign student and follow all those rules.
And they're not obviously illegal immigration. There's no means by which we can do any of that vetting, right? So we don't know who's coming across the border.
We don't know who they are, and a lot of times they'll pay for fake IDs, and a lot of Americans' Social Security numbers get hijacked by illegal aliens. They get sold on somewhere in a park. I know in Los Angeles there's a little park where you just pay $200 and you get people's identity.
Wow.
I mean, identity theft is a big problem. It's not just people from outside of the country. It's people inside using American citizens' Social Security number. In fact, there was a case about 10 years ago where a woman who was working in California was being investigated by the IRS because apparently she lived in New York, but there was some guy in California who was working in construction, and she tried to tell the IRS, look, I can't work in an office in New York and also work at the same time working in the construction field. Yeah. In fact, I don't have the capability to work in construction. And they said, no. And so she had to prove that she was a victim of identity theft, and some guy was filing her income tax before her, so he was getting all the benefits and rebates, and she was having to spend thousands of dollars to defend herself with the IRS. And who wants to deal with the IRS?
Yeah, I've personally been targeted by the IRS under Lois Lerner, so I'm not a fan.
well, I have to say, not everyone in government is a bad character, but I mean, the IRS does work hard, but they are limited to the piece of paper, and so sometimes not everyone can think logically and realize.
And it's such a massive agency that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, and so you get a different agent, and they don't have the background. It's a mess.
That's one of the reasons why I like a smaller government, because there's less opportunity for making errors and mistakes.
Yeah, that's right. So, we had a case here in 2005, I believe it was. There were a couple of brothers in Washington County. They were Hispanic, and they had this ID mill going where they were cranking out. Some estimates were, it was thousands of fake Oregon driver's licenses, and then anybody could pay a couple $100 to get one of those, and then move to a different state and change their information, and then have that permanent fake ID. And Oregon isn't compliant with Real ID yet, but I suppose we will be at some point if they figure it out. Maybe they'll figure it out at some point. But anyway, but Oregon is sort of a hotbed of being able to come as an illegal alien, get a fake ID, and then disperse across the nation and change your information over and get more legitimate ID, and you'll never be discovered.
And that's completely unfair to American citizens, the American worker, the American family, to be able to have people take advantage of the system. I just don't understand how people aren't more outraged by this disparity of justice.
Right. And it's not about the race or the quality of human being as much as it is fundamental fairness and the rule of law.
Yeah, actually, speaking of race, what was it? Just a couple of weeks ago, somebody from Canada was here illegally, and he was charged on weapons crime, and I think it was in the state of Virginia, ironically, and he got arrested, and he's being prosecuted as an illegal alien from Canada. So, race, the issue with alien is means foreigner. You're a foreigner. So if you're from another country, you come here. It doesn't matter what you look like, what your age is, or your gender, or anything about it. If you don't have the proper documentation, if you didn't follow and comply with the rules, then you are an alien. Even tourists can become aliens if they overstay their time.
Sure. And you go to any other country on earth and you are expected to go through the steps and assimilate into society. And they have far left activists on this issue have made it so that assimilation is somehow racist now. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, you just look at the southern border of Mexico. They have a wall bigger than the one we're building.
Well, I won't necessarily point to one particular spectrum of the political spectrum, because sometimes there's people on both sides. So I like to refer to them as the open borders crowd, the ignorant people who they either know what they're doing or they're completely oblivious to the dangers that are going to be brought in for all Americans and communities. And I've seen communities devastated. And then we have this sanctuary issue. It doesn't just, if you're in sanctuary jurisdiction, the criminals don't just stay there. They go and, propagate in other non-sanctuary jurisdictions. And you're just basically providing sanctuary protection for corrupt politicians and criminals with no sanctuary for poor, really good Americans.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit, because here in Oregon we had Measure 88 in 2014 that made it illegal to give out driver's cards to illegal aliens. The legislature, in their wisdom, upheld the will of the voters by completely undermining the will of voters and passing that last session anyway and giving illegal aliens driver's cards. What's the problem with driver's cards? I mean, other than we've talked a lot about the fundamental unfairness of different application of the law, but let's talk driver's cards specifically. What's the problem with that?
Right. Well, California had that issue. Back in 2014, I worked as a volunteer judge, and I heard traffic court cases, and I was specifically told, look, if this person's an illegal alien and they have their car impounded, you're supposed to let that car be released with no fine, and
no storage fees?
And no storage fees, nothing. Just let that go with no charge. And I said, well, what about an American citizen? They said, oh, that's okay to charge them an impound fee and storage fees and to also fine them for their traffic violation. That's okay. And I said, well, that doesn't seem to be equal justice for all people that show up for traffic court. There's a group of people who've already broken the law by being here illegally. And they said, well, you have to release the car because they need to get to their jobs. And I said, well, what about Americans who need to get to their work who've had their car impounded?
What jobs? They're not supposed to be able to be hired.
Exactly. They're not supposed to be getting a job. They're not supposed to be working. It basically undermines job opportunities, and also the employers who are paying under the table are not contributing to payroll taxes.
Right. And you're taking jobs away from Americans, but also there's no incentive. They get driver's cards, they get insurance, they get a job. There's no incentive for them to go through the legal route and become citizens. Why bother?
Well, actually, in some cases, they aren't getting car insurance. What I've heard from a lot of car insurance places is what they do is they get insurance for 1 month. So they can register their car, and then they stop paying, and so they're basically driving without insurance for the remainder of the year. They want to have and some of them don't even bother registering their vehicle, so they're just driving around, or they're stealing somebody's car and driving it around and not taking any responsibility for their vehicle. So it doesn't really solve the problem. And that's what people were promised in California, is that, if they get driver's licenses, then they'll have car insurance and then we won't have to worry about uninsured motorists. Well, no, that was a complete lie. It's completely bogus, and we still have to pay for uninsured motorists.
Right. Our insurance rates didn't go down at all, did they?
No, they went up. They went up higher. And so and our roads are more congested, and we're not getting the taxes and fees to pay for the roads to be upgraded. But our corrupt politicians are hoping that the sucker American taxpayer is going to be putting out more money so they can pay off for special deals and provide insurance for illegal aliens, and maybe we'll get our roads fixed, but we're going to be giving this money out to people who have not even contributed to society. And if they contribute, it's nowhere near the amount of money they get from the tax builders.
That's exactly right. And I think it was Tennessee a couple of years ago had experimented with driver's cards and then repealed it because it didn't work.
They realized.
Are you aware of?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And they realized that it was not as it had been promised to them. And they realized immediately they needed to repeal that. And there was no real business for non-citizens to be having driver's cards. They're not supposed to be driving on a road. They're not even supposed to be in this country.
Well, right. Yeah. Let's get back to the main point, right? So, and that goes to your point, right? That illegal aliens get a lot better treatment than legal aliens or Americans.
Yeah. It made me wonder, why did I bother going through the system? I don't resent what I had to go through, and I understood exactly, even at 16 years of age, I understood the importance of being checked to make sure I didn't have any contagious diseases, because you don't want to be spreading diseases and creating like a pandemic.
Yeah.
And I also understood about not having a criminal background, because they want people who come here are going to be contributing members of society. So it took a long time, and I don't resent that, but I do resent the fact that there are people who cheat and cut in the line, and they get benefits that they're not entitled to, and yet our corrupt politicians keep looking the other way, and our government officials are like, oh, well, and it's like, that's what I see the problem is our public is not holding the government accountable. And when I worked for government, when the public got upset with something and they stuck to it and they kept pushing the government to change, the government made a difference.
That's right. Let's talk real quick about, speaking of holding the government accountable. And I understand that you represent a nonpartisan nonprofit, so you can't take a particular stand.
No.
But it seems pretty obvious 2020 immigration is going to be a pretty big subject. That we got the presidential election coming up.
It is the number one issue, and when I've seen results of polls, and it doesn't matter how their political persuasion, this is the number one issue for Americans. They want to see that border wall finished. They want to see immigration enforcement, because most people understand the fundamental fairness of equal treatment, and no more game playing and no more special treatment to people who shouldn't be getting special treatment in the first place.
Right. So we've talked a lot about the Constitution. It's in was it Article 3, I believe it is, where immigration is the purview of the president
and the federal government.
The federal government,
the sovereignty of the country. Then there's also the 14th Amendment, but that doesn't provide birthright citizenship. It's only for even my sister was born in 1960 in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Still has never gotten her citizenship because she didn't go through the legal process. My parents at that time, they were there temporarily to deal with contagious diseases of polio and tuberculosis. So my sister had not gone through the process of becoming an American citizen. So she's now still in Canada. But the situation is, anyone who's born in the United States, it has to be to a legal resident or a citizen. So a lot of these illegal aliens who've been doing this since the 1960s really have been unjustly rewarded with citizenship for their child. And that is absolutely wrong. And I believe that's going to be an issue that's coming before the courts. And then we'll talk about recruiting attorneys.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, talk about is there a case that's making its way through the federal courts?
Oh my gosh, we got the public charge rule that's going through, and that's been in effect even before the United States became a country. I mean, in 1640, people had to come here. They needed to be able to provide for themselves. And we also have that case. So there's the public charge rule. Then there's also the DACA, there's 5 illegal aliens who are the DACA recipients who think that they should be allowed to get public benefits and still get their citizenship. So eventually we will probably see those at the Supreme Court. Oh, they're scheduled to be heard this year.
Okay.
So, and yeah, it's kind of a shame because 2009, President Obama said it was an unconstitutional executive order, but this is 2009. They've had 10 years to get themselves legal status, and they've never bothered.
Right. Okay, so obviously this it's equal protection under the law and equal access to the law, and the 14th Amendment never was intended to grant birthright citizenship. We know
that.
To
non-citizens or non-residents. And what it was intended as a temporary measure to provide citizenship to people who had formerly been slaves and the offspring of slaves. And that was the only intention of the 14th Amendment, not to say, hey, if you're a foreigner, if you can sneak into this country and drop a baby, poof, they've got citizenship. No, that was never the intention.
Right.
So,
yeah. Talk about what Early is doing and recruiting attorneys to file these cases. What are you guys doing?
Okay, well, we're trying to recruit attorneys, and that's where I come in. I'm the director of Attorneys United for a Secure America. My role is to recruit attorneys across all 50 states. We are gaining traction and more attorneys, and the public is hearing about our organization. And the more people hear about it, they go, hey, we've got people on our side. And the Immigration Reform Law Institute is the only voice for the American people. So if you know an attorney or you are an attorney, please go to our website at AUS America, so AUSAMERICA.org, AUSAamerica.org, or IRLI.org, and you can sign up to join. We want law students, we want lawyers, we want investigators, even professors could come and help by writing articles on behalf, and that's what we're doing. We've got lawsuits in all 50 states, and we need more attorneys. And there is we don't disclose your name, so you get privacy. And we just need to be able to have attorneys so we can file more lawsuits and be involved to protect American citizens. And we are sincere, so you can look at our website to see that we really and truly are on your side, because there's a lot of organizations out there that sound good, but they're not really.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of immigration, the ACLU and all those other organizations on the other side, on the open border side, that have armies of attorneys. So it's really important that we fight back with the lawfare tactic that we have tended to underuse.
Yeah, we have, and this is a great opportunity. And once attorneys hear about my organization, I've met a number of wonderful Oregon attorneys, and they're already signing up. And I know we need more, and I think there's no reason to be afraid. My name's out there, and I've never had any problems, and nobody would dare come after me. And if they do, they're going to be very sorry. So there's really nothing to be afraid of. And I think as an attorney, you really aren't supposed to be afraid. And Americans deserve to be represented. We have too many people on the other side representing illegal aliens and people who have no business coming in here. And the majority of Americans fully support the mission of the Immigration Reform Law Institute. So it makes sense that we should be able to have lots of attorneys, coming to assist us. We provide all sorts of, it's not that you're going to be putting yourself in debt. You're going to be able to help us where you can. And we do, we are able to come up with some financial arrangements to help you out so that you're not doing this for free or putting yourself in debt, like I said.
Lorraine Woodwark, thanks for being on the Behind the Curtain podcast. Give one more quick shout out to the organizations you're representing, how we can find you, social media links if you've got them. Give it a big plug.
Okay, thank you. I am on LinkedIn. For AUSA, and that is Attorneys United for a Secure America. And then there's also the Immigration Reform Law Institute, where I work. And they are IRLI.org and AUSAamerica.org. And both of those organizations, you can find what we stand for, find articles, you can find all sorts of information about the actual immigration policies and how immigration works. So you can get yourself educated, and it's open to everybody. And we also have a sister organization that I'm going to mention for the first time. Oh boy. Yeah. The Federation for American Immigration Reform, which is FAIR, FAIRUS.org, and they are an outstanding organization. They provide lots of information, and if you're interested in having a town hall in your community, I would contact them, and they are fabulous, and we love them dearly.
Yes, I know they do a lot of work with Oregonians for immigration reform as well.
Yes, they do.
Great organization. Lorraine Woodwark, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right.